So S-tier amplifiers are now only $300. What? Look, I never really put things like this, but if 300 bucks is your budget, this is what you should get. Just buy this thing. It's incredible. Just listen to the specs. They're insane. There's so many I have to read them off my phone. 7.6 watts into 16 ohms, 6.4 into 32 ohms. It has a dual ES9039 Q2M DAC chip. It's got 133 dB dynamic range and signal to noise ratio. The total harmonic distortion is 0.00006%. It has a brand new X-Hybrid triple stage amplifier. It's got Bluetooth, LDAC, remote control, built-in EQ, and custom EQ that can be saved on the device. And it's only 300 bucks. Topping, who hurt you? Disclosures, Opus, the audio store, sent this out. No one is paying or asking me to say anything good or bad. Topping had nothing to do with this review, and all thoughts and opinions, like always, are my own. I'm also launching some new merch, so make sure you pick that up. Do it. I'm still waiting on mine. Look, I don't know how they're doing this. They managed to pack all those specs, all that power, and an inbuilt power supply into this tiny little chassis, and they don't have any heat issues at all. They don't even have any vents on this thing. I don't get it, but I'm happy it's here. As far as some of the technology that's in here, they're using a new amplifier style. For a while, they were relying on their NFCA style of amplifiers, which was nested feedback composite amplifier. And now they're using something called a triple stage X hybrid amplifier. And as far as I can tell on Google, this is the only amp so far with it. So this is the debut of it. And I'm pretty impressed. Now, as far as features, this is actually pretty feature packed for being what it is actually. This not only has a screen that has a couple of visualizers on it, which make the interactability with the device pretty good, but they've actually added a couple functionality things that I think were great moves. For example, now through the menu system on this, you can change what the front button press does through a lot of different things like cycling EQ profiles or just turning EQ on and off. And they also allow you to set custom settings for the A and B buttons on the remote control as well. This is sick. Great additions, love it. This is also one of the few topping devices that can go with a software called Topping Tune, which allows you to upload custom EQs onto this device. So they have a couple like standard presets. They have bass 1, bass 2, airy, warm, and dynamic, but you can also make a custom EQ for this and upload a few of them onto the device, and you can just switch with that new custom volume knob button or the A and B button between all of them. So this is really sick. And they also work fast. So you hear the changes happen immediately as soon as you press the button. Now, a lot of the presets are pretty self-explanatory, but I think that they actually work pretty well. Bass 1 is bass, bass 2 is more bass. Airy seems to reduce the lower mid-range and bass response a little bit and make things seem a little bit more lively. You typically want to use this with a bit darker headphones that you want a little bit more treble extension. The opposite is seemingly what's happening with the warm preset, where it's darkening some of the treble response and some of the upper mid-range and just providing a nice overall warmth to the headphone. This is actually my favorite mode, mostly because of how subtle it is. It still keeps kind of what the headphone is naturally sounding like, but just kind of adds a little bit more warmth to it without really affecting like fidelity on the top end, which is really nice. This is actually the one that I used the most while testing this amplifier. And then dynamic, I think it's doing a bit of dynamic range, but I really didn't like the effect on this on a lot of headphones. And then of course you have custom EQ, which it's notable that if you're using EQ on your computer anyways, there are other better EQ softwares, but they don't all load onto the device like this does. And it's just kind of an additional feature that comes with this. So I think it's really cool that they're including this. This is continuing something that I've said before, but I think moving forward, what's going to separate amps like this from a lot of the rest is going to be EQ. EQ is a huge benefit, especially when you put it with a button that just allows you to easily switch between all of the EQ profiles. That's going to be super nice. So let's talk about the actual sonic performance of this amplifier, because it's great. This X Hybrid is a really amazing, really good sounding amplifier, and it's got surprising power. And the power specs are not just like a data sheet princess type specs. It actually has a substantial, very clean sound. Now, as far as what I've been using, I have no issues using a high-end headphone like an Abyss Joel with this amplifier. The resolution capability out of this amp is nothing short of spectacular for $300. 10 years ago, this type of sound probably wouldn't even be possible. 5 years ago, you might be looking at the beginnings of some of the NFCA tech for toppings like A90. And this is sort of like better than A90 performance. Back when the A90 came out, people were talking about how the sharpness aspect of it sounded unnatural. And then they came out with amplifiers like discrete amps like the A90D, which sort of had all the fidelity and power and strength of the A90, but didn't come with the over sharpening sound. And it came out with something that seemed a bit more real and less artificial. This maintains sort of that realness from the A90D type of sound. And with the substantial power that this offers, it can really drive a lot of headphones. And with a preset like the warm preset, you can really slap that on a clinical sounding headphone and really make it sound pretty organic and really enjoyable. But the stock and default sound of this with no EQ is surprisingly good for a solid state. This really doesn't sound like a budget amplifier where a lot of times you're going to compromise on something like either a dynamic range limitation. It says 133 dB dynamic range, and it sounds like it. It's super strong. It doesn't have glare issues or tonal issues, and it sounds quite a bit more thorough for higher end headphones than a previous amplifier like a DX3 Pro Plus, which is about $200. The extra $100 here, I think, is well worth it. You get so much more of an amplifier than, I don't know, than just was previously available for $300. And I think it probably goes without saying because this has been true for a lot of toppings amps for a while, but you can plug IEMs into this. There's 2 gain stage settings between a low and high, and the low one is really, really good and really controlled for things like IEMs. And then the high gain mode is more than enough for headphones like this. Now, it's not without some limitations though. There are still a couple, very few, but a couple headphones where I think you can get better sound with better amps. For example, this is Farah unveiled in the SJY Carbon. These are really, really demanding planars, and where you're gonna notice most of the sound difference between this and a much higher end amp, which you kind of have to go a lot higher end, is in the bass response. And to be completely fair to these, one, these are kind of exceeding the price bracket that I think this is going for, but also these are extreme examples of headphones that seem to require a lot more power than the vast majority of headphones. But I'm kind of getting away from the main point. When it comes to solid state sound, if you're into that ultra precise, dynamic, really lively, colorful sound, this is just exceptional. It's very, very good. Now, the physical build is not only pretty small and compact, but it's quite nice. This generation actually seems to have slightly better build quality than the previous generation. I don't know if this is steel, but it definitely sounds a bit more solid than the Gen 1 did, for example. You have 4 inputs, including Bluetooth, coaxial, optical, USB, and then you have XLR and RCA for your DAC out. And as far as build goes, for $300, I think Topping did a great job here, actually. Now, is there a reason to buy a nicer amplifier? Yes, technically. There's more power, better options, different sound signatures. There's honestly still lots of reasons. However, I think the reality of this amplifier is that for 99% of not just people, but 99% of audiophiles, this is pretty much going to cover you. And it's really only that last 1% who need higher end amps. For example, the next topping review that I'm doing is for the A900 and D900, their flagship. Those are way more expensive as a combo, and the delta between those two and this is not that far. It's surprisingly close. Those are amps and DACs for that last 1%, but for everybody else, man, this is just incredibly good for $300. This is like an end game amp, easy. It's got enough power for everything. I literally can't recommend it enough. It's insane.